Let's proceed straight away with the next part of the agenda. And in the meantime, if anyone feels like having a snack or a drink or a coffee, please go ahead. We won't feel distracted or disturbed by you. The topic for discussion is Say No to Corruption. And the first speaker on my right here will be Yang Berhormat Rafizi Ramli. As I said earlier, he's the man of the hour because he's, I think, tomorrow or day after planning to go to Hong Kong to find out about a famous suitcase. And recently, he has founded the Organization for the Oversight and Whistleblowers of Malaysia, and of course, he's fighting his own battles. But this just tells you, that when the issues are right and the integrity is right, we don't care. Race, religion, all these do not become divides for us. We are prepared to support the person irrespective of those as long as the qualifications are right. So without wasting much time, I will pass the mic over to Rafizi, who will say a few words on the subject. A subject which is very dear to his heart.
Assalamualaikum, a very good evening, Mr. Shankar, Saudara Robert Lazar, Uncle Bernard, and everyone. I'm a bit concerned because it puts YB there. When you are not a member of parliament, YB can only mean yang bermasalah or yang brat. Either way, it's not good for me. How much time do I have? It's about, 10, 15 minutes? Yeah, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm honored to be here. I'm so sorry that I was late. It was not by purpose. You get accustomed to KL traffics. After a while, getting stuck 2 hours in traffic is what Barisan Nasional leaves you after 55 years. So, I'm not actually trained to be graph busters. I mean, I went to university to do engineering, ended up doing accounting, dabble into few other things, accounting, oil and gas, and not by design as well, ended up doing this. Thank you so much to Dato' Sri Shahrizad and family. And because once you get the taste of it, I think a lot of people ask me, why did we do what we did? Of course, our opponents will say it's purely for political maneuverings and so on. I would consider it as an adventure, and it's good to be proven right. So it's as we started with NFC, and we started with one piece of information, which is there was not enough cows in the farm, because we knew that they were given 250 million, and we started with only one finding. When we went to the farm, we spent about half a day there, of course, menyamar and so on, and we literally counted the cows, and there were only 4 cows that I could count. I mean, if you have any decent education background whatsoever, I mean, we have our inquisitiveness, and of course, I wanted to satisfy my curiosity that, BN or the government must have some good justification why 250 million only ended up with only 4 cows. It all started with that. The rest was all basically Googling and curiosity, and we just wanted to satisfy ourselves that we were right, and the good thing about being in Pakatan Rakyat in this country nowadays is for one single sentence or statement that you make, BN will fumble so much with their reply, so much so that their own reply will provide you 4 or 5 leads that you follow. And that's how I think from one month to another, we uncovered condos and the rest. If only No Omar or the ministers actually know how to shut up, I think it wouldn't go to where it was. And likewise, I think we are now looking at the 40 million. It's again, is a question of curiosity, because it's illogical that people can transfer money in bags. It was actually $16 million worth of ringgit, of money, Sing dollars, yeah. And although I know that you could actually pack 16 million Sing dollar in a bag, but there are strict laws in terms of anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism, and so on. So if Datuk Sri Nazri was serious about that, as everything was overboard, surely I think my curiosity is I wanted to see some proof to it. That's my training. I mean, I was trained as an engineer and I was trained as an auditor. You know, you would not conclude anything until you actually prove it and until you see the evidence, you know. But of course, as I say, our greatest blessing and our greatest asset in this battle against graft in Malaysia is the kind of nincompoop ministers that we have. Because the moment they actually open their mouth, it provides a lot more leads. So when Datuk Sri Nazri started to say that the money was not actually seized at the airport, it was actually banked and frozen in an account, it was then transferred. So it opened a series of possibilities that we followed. We followed the leads on Money Laundering Act, Anti-Money Laundering Act 2001. We followed the leads with the Independent Commission Against Corruption in Hong Kong. And I think we are going to hit something because tactically it was very wrong for our minister to drag ICAC's reputation into this scandal, this problem. If only they confined the whole thing to just Barisan Nasional and Pakatan and Malaysia, that wouldn't allow us to go to Hong Kong and present to the legislators in Hong Kong that, look, here you have a minister in Malaysia that reportedly quoted you and put the blame on you for dropping a scandalous corruption and anti-money laundering case involving a senior minister. And if Hong Kong does not do something or clear the air about it, obviously there's a big question mark about ICAC's complicity in the whole thing. And trust me, when you sit down and convince the legislators and media and activists from Hong Kong, they will say, yep, this is no longer a Malaysian issue, this is actually Hong Kong's issue as well, and it is in Hong Kong's best interest to clear it. So tomorrow I'm going to go to Hong Kong with a few others. I have to bring the MPs who can speak Cantonese and Chinese because I don't. And we're going to present the case to 4 different political parties, a few MPs, a group of journalists as well as activists. And our point is this. Hong Kong authority values highly the reputation, the international reputation attached to ICAC. In Malaysia, that reputation has been marred because a minister alleged that it was ICAC that had dropped the whole case. And in Malaysia lately, internationally as well, we have evidences of complaints from other authorities, the latest one being the Indian authority complaining that the Malaysian authority lately has refused to give cooperations when it comes to investigation into alleged corruptions of people with high-level connections in Malaysia. So there is a pattern to it, that when you start to investigate individuals with close connections to the ruling elite, automatically the authorities in Malaysia will refuse cooperation, and by statute, after a certain period, the foreign authorities would have to actually drop it. It's going to be our first visit, but it's not going to be our last. Hopefully, we will make frequent visits to Hong Kong. And thank you to Air Asia, it doesn't cost that much to go to Hong Kong nowadays. So we can make frequent trips. Anyway, I think if we go back to what Mr. Shankar has outlined in his book, and I think the common feeling amongst everyone, and it transcends race, it transcends background. The number one ill of the country is corruption, is because it destroys the value that can build our society and nation in the future. When you inculcate in certain sections of our society that you don't have to work hard, that you can buy your way through, and that your talent, your ability no longer matters. What matters is who you know, and what matters is who you rub shoulders with. It's not just a question of short-term bankruptcy of the country, and it's going to happen. If this continue, of course, within 6-7 years, the kind of public finances that, Barisan Nasional's last days is about 3-4 months after this. Hopefully we will rectify after this. Anyhow, I mean, even if Pakatan Rakyat inherits the government, the kind of public finances that we have to pay, the public has to pay, is just not sustainable. So something drastically has, we have to do something drastically. So everyone, I think, understands the ramifications on our public finances, on our competitiveness, on our economy, if we do not rid of corruption, rampant corruption, as soon as possible. But I think, I personally, having gone through the mill, and like I think a lot of you, although I may be a Malay, and I did get a scholarship which I repaid every single cent of it, so they can't say much. I think it's a question that we don't want our society in the future to rest our laurel because you think that you can buy your way. I want every single one of my generation and the people after me to work as hard as anyone else to earn something in this life, because it's not just about material being. It is just not about being up there. It is about the satisfaction of having put your best effort to get something. And that is missing from our society. The longer we live and we allow corruption to become a cancer in our society, that is going to eat up that value in our society. Be it with the Malays, be it with the Chinese, be it with the Indians or Ibans or Kadazan. Because corruption transcends race, religion or background. Because it's only logical after a while, if everyone around us gets through his life through cheating, then what's the point of working very hard? Because everyone else doesn't have to work hard, they just cheat. And I think my generation, regardless of whether you are Malay or Chinese or Indians or Iban or Kadazan or anything, most of us actually are cut off from handouts or good contracts or connections. Most of us, whether even if you are a top scholar and you come back from the best university, all of us actually have to struggle just like anyone else. And that realization that this society under Barisan Nasional that breeds corruption no longer cultivates a culture where we value hard work, where we value talent, and where we value intelligence. I think that is the kind of realization that galvanized a lot of us, the young people, to stand up against corruption. Because we don't get it now, we don't benefit anything most of the time from the system, and surely if we don't do something about it, there is nothing much of the system left by the time we are around Uncle Shankar's age. So, and I think I just want to cap it off there because I'm sure there will be Q&A after this. I am encouraged, I think, by the kind of support and outpouring of encouragement that people come forward now. My center, where we train possible whistleblowers, as well as people who can handle whistleblowers who come with sensitive information, we do have training sessions from time to time. The response has been really good. Every time we run a training course at night, during weekday like this, we will get around 30 to 40 people per night. And a lot of these people are young, and a lot of them are professionals, and a lot of them are actually from Malays as well. Because to me that's an encouragement, because slowly people understand that this is something that my generation and the generation after me hopefully have to do, because otherwise we are going to pay the ultimate price. So as much as I think we spend a lot of time thinking about how bleak Malaysia and what a loss of opportunity it has been for the last 50 years under Barisan Nasional, I think we can also look forward and look positively towards a future where I think in the future more and more people will stand up and say no to corruption. And I hope, lastly, Mr. Shankar's book is not the first and the last book. Hopefully there'll be more and more people who actually put also the efforts to write, to educate, and to make sure that there is a continuous realization that corruption remains the #1 problem in this country, that every single group from our society has to focus on to get rid. And that has to begin by getting rid of the current government. Thank you very much.
Men always think they are 10 to 15 years younger than they actually look, you know. I never thought of myself as an uncle, but there you are. Uncle Bernard maybe, but not Uncle Shankar. That's worrying. Anyway, we know Rafizi's stand on corruption, and it's not just a stand, but it's also something he's taking action and doing something about it, which is very important. And it frightens me that he's both an engineer and an accountant. And you know that joke about an engineer, a lawyer, and an accountant who are being interviewed, and the question they ask is, interviewed for a job, and they ask the question, how much is 2 and 2? The engineer says, pulls out his slide ruler, and he says, well, it looks like it's 4 plus, give or take 0.002% either way, you know. They say, okay, thank you. And then they pull up the lawyer. The lawyer says, well, it's been argued in the Supreme Court that, you know, 4 could be 5 or even 3. It's very iffy. We need a full Supreme Court of 9 judges to look into it. And of course, when they put the question to the accountant, he says, how much is 2 and 2? He looks at them and he says, what do you want it to be? You know? So my next speaker will be Mr. Robert Lazar, who in his second year of studying law wanted to give up law and become an accountant. You know, but fortunately, he stuck the course, and today he's carved out a very exciting career as managing partner of Schoen de la Mort. And I'll pass the mic over to him for him to give us a few words on his thought of say no to corruption, perhaps some legal, not mumbo jumbo, but some legal points which we have missed.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, can I congratulate my old friend Shankar on his book, which I'm sure was inspired by the years in London when we read a magazine which is still very much in publication called Private Eye. And I think his style of writing is very much modeled on that, though of course with a Malaysian flavor. Or have I let something out of the bag? Now, my only qualification to be here this evening to speak to you is because I am an old friend of Shankar's, or Shanks, as we used to call him. And when he invited me this evening, he then called me and said, would you like to be on the panel? And I said, I really don't see what qualifies me to be on this panel, except for the fact that we are old friends. And he said, but you are a lawyer. And that seems to suggest that because you are a lawyer, that you are in some way qualified to speak on corruption. And he then says, the theme is say no to corruption. And I thought to myself, that's the kind of question you ask and you get an instant answer. Because obviously, nobody is going to come and contradict the theme, which is say no to corruption. If there is, I will be very surprised, because everybody, it cuts across every division in society, be it political, be it social, that we all avowedly say no to corruption. But whether it happens in practice, that is a matter that each one of us would then have to decide whether that is the case or not. So I told him I will speak about the topic from the area that I am most acquainted with, which is in the practice of law. And what I really want to say is that there is actually more to the legislation and the statutory framework that is available to many people. The fact is that corruption is recognized as a global phenomena. It is not a purely domestic issue. Now, how do we then get involved in that? Arises in a number of ways, and I will mention two. The first is there are a lot of jurisdictions who do business in Malaysia who have statutes in their own country which impact on the way they do business outside their country. Now, one very clear example is the United States, which has the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Now, it applies to Malaysia in the sense that if an American businessman comes to Malaysia and he indulges in an undesirable act of gratification, he is liable to be prosecuted in America, notwithstanding the fact that the offense took place in Malaysia. Now, how do we get involved? We get involved in the basis that whenever we are retained by an American client, one of the first things we are told is that there is this act, and that we have to make sure that when we advise our clients and the way in which they carry on business in Malaysia, we have to make sure that these provisions are not contravened in any way. And that is something that has been, it first appeared, I think, in America. It has had its impact, even insofar as Malaysia is concerned. It is documented that there is one particular transaction from Malaysia which has been raised by the United States Department of Justice because it involved a Malaysian company. In fact, there's even a movie starring Mel Gibson about the effects of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Then the UK followed suit with the Bribery Act, which is even more stringent. And I think across the European community, you find that they are all very conscious that the way their nationals do business outside their countries will have an impact insofar as their laws are concerned. Now, the second area that I would mention, which has a more direct impact on the way in which we practice, and this is something which may not be well known, is the fact that there is a Malaysian Act, which is the Money Laundering Act. In fact, it's a much longer title. It involves not just money laundering, but anti-terrorism activities. And what has happened is that essentially we, as practitioners of law, and we are not the only ones, banks and other institutions are also subject to the same thing, we actually end up having to become whistleblowers in a limited sense. No longer can we run the argument that if a client tells us to do something that we are beholden to and that we have to carry out the instructions without questions. So the first thing that we now have to do is to ascertain and verify the identity of the client. If we don't do that, and it happens that the client is in some way channeled monies through a legal practice, we become subject to some kind of sanction as well. So we have adopted, and this is mandatory, that you have to establish a procedure whereby the first thing you do is you investigate your own client. It is known as know your client. So you have to make sure that the client you are working for is a genuine businessman, that he is not indulged in any undesirable activities. Now, besides the identity of the client, because we don't want to be used as means of money laundering, we also have to ascertain that the transaction is a bona fide transaction. And that actually places a great burden on the lawyers, because we have to then take steps to make sure that we are not being used by these people. And of course, you know, legal transactions very often feature as very nice means of gratification, especially a failed legal transaction. One of the most common forms of bribery, I am told, is to enter into a transaction and then abort the transaction and then let the other side keep the deposit and say that I can't complete, here you are, you can keep the deposit. On the face of it, it's an innocent business transaction which went bad. But you have to dig deeper these days and to find that there may be more to it than just a failed transaction. So the situation really is that insofar as awareness is concerned, I think it has been raised to a level that did not exist when I first started practicing. When I first started practicing, we never had any of these strictures. Today, we have to do all these. So the awareness is there, the legislation is there. What is not there is something which I think most of you would be able to decide for yourselves. Now, I just want to end this by saying that the concept of corruption from the legal perspective is not an elastic, it cannot be an elastic concept in the sense that it cannot change with regard to time or personality. Now, one of the more celebrated cases in Malaysia in the mid-70s involved a certain Menteri Besar who was charged for corruption in the mid-70s. And if you walk across the street over to the HSBC building, you will see that the building, the parapet of the building, sets out onto the 5-foot way, the common thoroughfare. Now, the allegation against the Menteri Besar, and this is documented, is that he solicited, in order to give approval, because it's technically state land, in order to give approval for the building to encroach onto state land, he solicited a donation to his political party. Okay? He did not ask for the money to be paid into his own pocket. He made it quite clear that you donate it to my political party. And in the mid-70s, that was sufficient for a prosecution of corruption to be leveled against him. That was more than 35 years ago. Today, as far as the law is concerned, that concept has not changed. It must still remain a corrupt act, even if you do not benefit from it yourself. It is not corruption merely because it didn't go into your own pocket. That's the legal test. And of course, on a more light-hearted note, if you go and see what's happening in Singapore, then you know that gratification can extend not only from the boardroom, it can even get into the bedroom. So that is how elastic it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, for some insights, legal insights into the situation. And I suppose this is why, if the government here is shy of prosecuting in some big cases, we still have recourse, as you would have read, that Swaram's case against the government in France concerning a company that has already been fined in the United States for bribery in Taiwan and Pakistan. So understanding the legal implications are sometimes very, very important for everyone. Last but not least, let me pass the mic to the famous, I don't know, famous or sometimes infamous Bernard Koo, who let me tell you a little bit about him. He was a teacher And some of his students are sitting at a table over there. And any teacher whose pupils are happy to see him after 40 years must have been somebody who's something in his profession to warrant such respect and affection even today. Beyond that, he was also popular among students of the 70s and 60s and 70s because he was very involved in the FA of Malaysia in developing youth football. And later he left the teaching profession and joined Goodyear Tires, where he was a trainer and a motivator. As I said earlier, he was responsible in two ways for the publication of my book. One was through the introduction of Gerakbudaya, and the other was introducing Rafizi Ramli last year when we all gathered outside the courts at Jalan Duta. So let me, without wasting any more time, pass the mic to Bernard to give us a chat on Say No to Corruption. Oh, he wants to stand. Okay.
No, Shankar, I'm not running away. I'm not used to, after leaving teaching, to look down on my audience. When I was a teacher, they put you on the little raised platform and you just taught your lesson from there, and I was very fluent because nobody dared to question me. Now that I've come out of that profession, I was once told by a member of the audience, stop looking down on us. So that's why I'm here. We are on the same floor talking about subject that's detestable but very important. When Shankar told me that I was the last speaker for today, I said, Mati lah, what am I going to talk about when you got Rafizi there, our champion, and then we got our legal mind there talking about corruption. What more have I got to say? But after hearing both the gentlemen, I took down a few notes and I realized that this subject is inexhaustible. It's a pervasive subject. Pervasive as in cancer. We have contacted or been infected by this thing called corruption, which is cancerous. And when Malaysia is concerned, we are in stage 4. And we all very lovingly refer to it as C4. Okay, let me through a few observations. Personal life and later on professional life. My father was just a meter reader. You know, they cycle from house to house, read your meter, right? And he did that every day, Monday to Saturday, 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock. After that, after lunch, he went to do some accounting for an electrical shop until 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock on, it is his free time. And he goes to the Padang in Taiping and he arrests whatever team is playing. 6 o'clock, he comes back for dinner, and by 8 o'clock, he's back in a place called Coronation Park keeping books. Whilst holding 3 jobs to put sufficient bread on the table in Taiping. Then he was promoted from meter reader to be inspector of meter reader around the late 50s and beginning of 60s. His good friend, the first CEO of Tenaga, that was called Central Electricity Board then, was Raja Zainul. He says, Bosu, I think no use to cycle too much now. Lah. I'm going to promote you to inspector of meter readers. You don't have to go to too many houses. You just take care of the factories in Penang. I mean, on the mainland. After 3 months, he enjoyed it. Just read the meter there, put the price, that's all. But on the 4th month, something happened. And I was in the teachers training college then, and I received this letter from him. I've got to tell you, around that time, the industrialization was coming up in Penang, on the mainland. Big steel mills, textile companies and all that. And he told me, I've been offered by some companies to massage the figures a bit. I didn't know the meaning of the word massage then. You see, I was a young kid then, never been to those places. So I said, what do you mean, Pa? One factory told me, if you can change the figure, read it the way we want, 5,000 extra for you. Now, in the late 60s, in the late 50s and beginning 60s, 5,000 is big bucks. So I said, Pa, why are you telling me this? He says, I'm not going to do it because I want to sleep every night. And my pa slept well, and he snored well, and he died in his sleep without even telling us. And then as a football coach, Malaysia Cup, we knew the results of the 8 p.m. game at 3 p.m. Just give you one example. I was in Malacca running the interstate football tournament for under 18, and the secretary of the Malacca FA invited us for breakfast. After breakfast, we went back to his office, drainage and irrigation. And about 9 o'clock, I was sitting down in one of the desks, waiting for him to call for another break. They have a lot of breaks on Saturday and in the civil service, Actually, they don't do much work at all. And 9 something, now that night, Singapore was playing Malacca, Malaysia Cup. And the call came from Singapore and they signaled to me to pick up the extension, in the government offices, all the phone, you don't have your own phone extension, So I picked it up and the voice over that side says, by the way, Mr. Chong, 3-1 today, you all cannot score more than 1, And the score was 3-1. And the bookies made it big. And I'm proud to say that I had people under me in school football. Santok Singh, our Spider-Man, Chinan, Mokhtar Dahari, whom I told him, if you don't play football for Selangor State, I will tell my uncle. I say, I'm not afraid. He says, you know who's my uncle? Who? Tan Cheng Oh, headmaster of VI. So he played football for us, and we put him in the President's Cup after that, and the rest is history. Coming out from the official football. After I left teaching, my Bahasa was rotten to the core. I'm essentially English educated, taught only English and English literature, and 3 months up at the Language Institute didn't do me any good at all except for the first 2 weeks. I left teaching, 24 hours notice. But the love for football was still there, and RRI that year was celebrating their 100th year existence. And they had a tournament. Every state had a team. And I was told to coach our RRI team in Sungai Buloh. Allowance, $10 a day. And during the course of the tournaments, interstate, we went into the finals against Terengganu. And the Terengganu manager comes up to me. He's not even a RRI personnel, just like me. I was not an RRI personnel. We were all told, help. And he came to me, hey, cikgu, kalau you kalah, semua players Pulau Redang. 5 hari saya belanja. How can we do that? We whacked the shit out of them. Then in professional life, they don't buy the players now, you know. They don't buy officials now. They slip the little envelope under the stack of files that are very common in the government servant's desk. But that became a bit irritable at once for a while. Then came along golf. Subtly now they use golf. Personal experience. I get very tired after the 4th hole and get very thirsty after the 5th hole. And around that time, I pray for the rain to come so that I can go on to the 9th hole. But this particular Wednesday, I think that's the day that government servants are allowed to play golf after lunch, you know. I don't know whether Wednesday or Friday. So I was told by my friend, hey Bernard, today sorry I can't play with you lah. But if you want, you can caddy for me lah. I said, no way, man. No, drinks on me after that. Oh, that changed the scenario. Then before teeing off, I said, so why can't I play with you to this today? We have our normal betting, you know, just for beers at the end of the day. And said, no, Bernard, I've been given $4,000 by this friend of mine, businessman, and I'm representing him, and I'm supposed to lose to the guy. And my friend is a 6 handicapper. Last hole, hardly 2 feet, putting. He missed that hole and it cost $4,000, and very nicely after bath and all that, over teh tarik in the clubhouse, openly 4,000 was count, you know. Witness, y'all, huh? I lost $4,000 to Encik so and so. And it became so bad that I think Ahmad Saji was the one who put a stop to it. Huh? No more golf. You play golf at your own time. At my regular kopitiam session, in which Commander Tai is normally one of our, but that particular day he was not there. And I threw this question to some of my Kopitiam buddies. All retired fellows, got nothing else to do. I asked them, what to you is business as usual in Putrajaya? What to you is business as usual in Putrajaya? Oh, the answers came. You know, the people, we old people, retired senior citizens, we always know best. One. So I listened, but this one was a gem. Business as usual in Putrajaya is a snake having sex with a vulture. Can you imagine that? Snake copulating with a vulture. And every time you sleep with this government or government officials, you can be sure that that special strain of STD will spread. That's the situation we are in. Corruption is a very serious crime. I mean, we have to agree on that, right? But what is the penalty? In Malaysia, you are big fish, nothing wrong. And by the way, now no more golf, no more pushing the envelope under the file. Now everything is given straightforward donation. And Rafizi, I think you're going to have a tough time in Hong Kong tomorrow. When honor, let me quote, when honor and law no longer stand on the same side of the line, how do we choose? How do the people choose? Think about it. The more corrupt a country, the more often they will change the constitution. America amended the constitution 22 or 23 times. We are going on to our 236th in our short life. We are bombarded with the word patriotism. You spit or you step on the image of a VIP, it's a no-no. When pictures are shown and gone viral about people peeing on images of the opposition, Putrajaya doesn't know about it. Worse still, Uttasan doesn't write about it. Nobody told them this, despite all the photos going viral. To spit on the image of a government official is a no-no, but it's okay to show butt to somebody else. And they say that if we do all these things wrongly against the VIPs, we are not patriotic. I like to equate our Malaysian patriotism to corruption. And I like to quote this statesman, Edward Griffin. He says, to oppose corruption in government is the highest obligation of patriotism. In this country, if Uttasan keeps quiet, it's not corruption. If the police say close the file, it's not corruption. It's just something that happened. No point dwelling on it. Every department is corrupt to the core. The MACC, that's a different type of animal. Incestuously related, closely incestuously related to the Election Commission. The government has shamelessly corrupted the system. The system handed down by Tunku Abdul Rahman and group. Now we have a homegrown, clone, corrupt crony culture. C4 again. Tunku Razali Kuli summed this up very succinctly when speaking to some 600 local and overseas students at a forum. And he says, and I quote, "We have a political class unwilling or unable to address the central issue of the day because they have grown fat and comfortable with a system built on lies and theft." End of quote, Cooley. And I'd like to end by referring to Dr. Amate's blog recently. And he wrote in his blog, and he made reference to a very, very senior former UMNO luminary. And this is what he said. UMNO is rotten to the core. It is rotten from its lowest level to the highest. What's left are remnants of people with self-interest who still hope of being rewarded for supporting UMNO. And he continues, quoting this senior UMNO luminary, "They are not nationalists and cannot be trusted." Dr. M quoted him, but chose not to elaborate anymore. I've got something similar with Rafizi. When he was arrested, you notice he handcuffed, he was smiling. You remember that? Have you all seen it? He was smiling as though, oh, achievement, man, Oscar. Because that was the same thing that happened to me when they arrested me in Ipoh during the Perak Assembly. When this guy coddled on me but didn't handcuff me and led me to the Black Maria, there were some photographers, and one of them I happened to know, he said, "Hey, don't smile lah, Bernard, you are being arrested, what for you smile?" Something similar, huh? Now, I like to end it this way. My stand has always been like this. Even when they question me why I put my national flag upside down, or they arrested me for questioning again on why I changed the PDRM logo from a tiger head into an Alsatian head. But until today, they have not charged me for sedition for doing that. But my flag still is upside down, because that's an international sign of distress. We are in distress. And on my little sidebar, my blog, I says, this flag will remain inverted as long as there is no semblance of good governance. Ladies and gentlemen, I will die for this country, but I will not die for this government or whatever government that comes into place. Thank you very much.
Think on the subject, but it's good to have an airing of views of young, old, and people in between. I mean, Bernard has talked a lot about his personal experiences. He's a bit off form, really, because he's unable to consume a few beers. If he had, he would have been regaling you with a lot more stories. We have a little bit of time now, so I'm going to open the this panel discussion to the floor. If any of you have any questions to ask, you can go over to the podium mic and pose any question. Or if you've got a loud voice like a loud hailer Rama, then please. And please tell us which panelist you would like to answer the question.
Shanks, I don't have a question, but I have a comment. And I wrote it down because if I don't make it here in an accident, my brother-in-law will bring it and read it out again.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't hear you. I'm a soldier, I'm loud enough. And also a VI boy, and we go way back with Shankar. There are two ayers who are shaking this country. The first was Ambika, and I think the second is Shankar. Corruption has gone unchecked for so long that it has become second nature to us. I have a plan, as in I have a dream. I love the BN so much that I want them to be voted in as the most credible opposition in the history of Malaysian politics. They are experts at corruption, cronyism, racism, and nepotism. So they provide the best check and balance to the Pakatan Rakyat government. This should keep the Pakatan Rakyat government under constant pressure to deliver. It's a win-win-win for the people. Let the PM do their job and also repent. If they do repent, we shall forgive them as God forgives us. We, the people, may give them a chance again after 5 years. In the present state, corruption cannot be eradicated because it starts from the top. Even the PM is stated and has not absolutely cleared himself. The levels of corruption is unbelievable. And I believe that even Hanuman, who lifted a mountain, cannot lift this off the nation anymore. I have a song title, I've already thought of it, but I don't have the words and lyrics. Maybe you all will be better, right? No more Joe, it's time to go. I haven't written the lyrics, so please, help me here. Let me warn the PR government also, that if they are in charge, don't forget that we, the people, are still in control. To do the needful, and we know what to do with you if you can't do your job. This reminds me of my good friend, Chief Inspector Terlocan Singh, who once said, kalau itu depan, tak ada guna, bagus juga, itu belakang juga, kita kena pusing. So you have 5 years of our timeline. Let us see what happens. Thank you very much.
Things as they are. So, any more questions? Yeah. Any more questions from anybody directed at the panelists?
As far as I can remember, corruption in this country was very popular in those days, was when you want to get a driver's license. I remember I had to pay 25 ringgit, not that because I was stupid, I couldn't drive. I can drive. I know my highway code and all that, but they still take 25 ringgit from me in order to get the driver's license. But those days are gone. Now corruption has taken new approach, new angle, and they are always trying to do something and say that it is not corruption. But if you go to the courthouse in these days, you find there are cases where it is very obvious that corruption has taken place. And then you will have witnesses and all that. And we know that corruption has taken place because the person who is in charge of that department, of that ministry, actually is the one behind all that. Now, when that happens, then you need to have witnesses to, you know, to go understand and say this and that. We have with us this evening lawyer Ramli Yusof over there. Now, he, as you remember, the famous Rosli Yusof, the famous Ramli, the police director of CID case, he was handling it, and in that process, he was being subjected to a lot of harassment and all kinds of things, this and that. And now he is suing the government because he won the case. He's suing the government, and he thought that all the people that he defended will now come back to be his witnesses in his counter suit on the government. But I was told, just sitting next to him, that all these witnesses has decided, no, will not come forward. If you subpoena us, we will come, but I will forget whatever has happened. I was just wondering whether this is another form of corruption that is taking place now. Maybe Rafizi can answer that. Thank you.
Over to you, Rafizi.
That's not a very easy answer. Before I go into that, I have to correct Uncle Bernard. You know, when I was photographed with the handcuff, I was not, I didn't plan to smile. I was asked to smile. And the reporters were there and they were asking, please smile. So obligingly, I smiled. And my lawyers by the side kept saying, don't worry, they're just going to put you by the lockup, outside the lockup, don't worry. It's not going to be in the lockup. So I smiled. I ended up in about 5 hours in lockup. I was not smiling then in the lockup. Anyhow, I think I think under the Act, of course, corruption has a very specific definition. Soliciting something in return. So I think in most of those cases, if we were to go legally, and I think Mr. Lazar would know better, but I would guess that legally they would not pass a corruption test. But I think that's the problem with the society, because we view corruption very much technically, and that's why you end up with a minister who can go to Parliament and announce a 40 million ringgit in a bag as a donation to UMNO. It's not corruption, because of course there's a very strict proof test that you have to go through by the law, and it's something that as pointed out by Uncle Bernard. I think it's something that the society has to change first, and I am always been criticized by XPRM precisely for that reason, because they accuse me of spoiling their witnesses, because they say every time we work on a specific case, and when we go to the public and press before they could gather enough evidence, that usually scare witnesses away from testifying. I think there's pros and cons to it. There's some truth to it, but my own experience, I think there's a large part of our society which hate corruption so much that they are more than willing to come forward. I mean, Cik Rosli might be a bit unfortunate because the kind of people that perhaps could have helped him were not willing to come forward. But as I say before, I was very encouraged, because even as it is now, every day we have people continuously coming to the center with what they claim as evidence. Of course, some people printing out from Uncle Bernard's blog will consider it as an evidence and they would want us to investigate that. But some people actually do come with highly classified documents that could put a lot of people behind bars. So I think the society is changing, and the good thing is it's changing from bottom up. It's changing especially from your common layman, from the clerks, from people on the street who feel that it's enough is enough of the last 50 years. And whatever they could get, even, that's why now I was told after the George Ken disclosure that put a highlight on the Prime Minister, our government departments have put very stringent system that you actually have to log in if you want to make photocopies or print or anything. You have to key in every single document that you want to copy or print nowadays. Because I think they know that in all probability, every single government servant is a good suspect for a whistleblower now, from the lowest to the higher up. And as much as we think that it's very, corruption was very pervasive for the last 30, 40 years, there are signs that things are turning around, because a lot of everything is just concentrated in the hands of a few. So hopefully in the future, while it is technically not a corrupt act now, not to cooperate in order to put some people behind bars for corrupt practices, hopefully our society in the future would widen the interpretation and understanding what actually a corrupt act is, so much so that in the future our society is more than willing always to come forward, and that means certain changes would have to take place, including the Whistleblowers Protection Act, including we got to repeal acts that currently protects too much of government documents and government agreements, that if you dare to disclose this to the public, obviously you'll end up behind bars. So I think all these changes are taking place simultaneously, and then there will be a convergence. And that's why I'm very optimistic. I give it another 10 years, maybe in Uncle Bernard's and the Shankars, our lifetime actually, we will see a big turnaround in our society where we will go from, corruption at stage 4 cancer to hopefully fully recover from all this, and I think changes has to take place all the way from the top first, and then after that, when the signal is very clear from the top, our society is more than ready to embrace this new culture. So good luck to Cik Rosli. Hopefully, if you perhaps start legal action again in 5-10 years time, it's going to be different, because it's going to be a different government, hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm addressing particularly Brother Rafizi and our legal expert there to enlighten us on this. I'm told from my conversations with some foreigners who are living along with me in Penang that in countries like England, the Exchequer would never allow the Prime Minister during campaigns to go throwing money around. Okay? The same in the States. I think the man who is practicing bribery here in my country is the Prime Minister himself. He is also the Minister of Finance. I see a serious conflict of interest when he goes and gives away money as though it is his. Can the panel kindly enlighten us? Is there any constitutional action that can be lodged against the Prime Minister for this, in my opinion, malpractice?
I'm glad that question was not directed at me. So I'll pass it to the practiced politicians and the practiced, polished legal minds. I think I will pass it to Robert first.
Well, I think the position insofar as the law is concerned is that if it is conducted during an election period, then there can be a source of an election petition to allege what is in effect a corrupt practice to invalidate the election. But that has to be in a particular constituency. And there is actually legal precedent in Malaysia, particularly in by-elections, because I think when it comes to general elections, it's a bit difficult to be specific. But there have been instances in Malaysia in by-elections where the line between corruption and the promise of development is a very thin line. But giving out money is, of course, a different thing altogether. And there have been cases where elections have been challenged on that basis. But of course, an election petition can only be taken after an election has been held. So that is the legal position.
Of course, this is a subject of much debate and anger, of course, especially during by-elections. One would have imagined in other countries when a prime minister go on record nationally that if you help me, I help you, and I give you 6 million on Monday. I think in other countries, the prime minister or the president would have been immediately impeached. There are a lot of discourses, especially between the parties, political parties, and SPR on what really constitute a caretaker government. Because although the concept of a caretaker government, and we are not even talking about announcements made during by-elections, we are talking about that very clear and important concept of caretaker government. I've been in a few forums, including with XPR as well. Until now, I think the discourses are going to and fro, because until now, there is, as far as my understanding from SPR's response, there doesn't seem to be a clear-cut confine of what a caretaker government can and cannot do. And that's why I think, although there is enough legally, or there is a concept of independent caretaker government implied in our constitution, but because BN behaves as if it is a government in perpetuity. So the behavior is that, does it matter if I announce this and that, because I'm going to be the next government anyway. Whatever I do now is not going to change the result of the election. So with that kind of impunity in the past, I think any efforts to define what constitutes a caretaker government can and cannot be done is quite fruitless. But of course now things are changing. I don't think anyone from Barisan Nasional can go into the next election arrogantly to claim that they are certain to be the next government. They are not. And this is where I think the civil society, the public must play that role, because going into the next election, the very concept of a caretaker government may decide the future of the country and which coalition will become the government. In the past, although there have been sections of our society and the learned group among the civil society that have focused on what a caretaker government can or cannot do, that remains quite academic before. But now I think, and hopefully I think I'm relying on a lot of good citizens here, in this last 3 or 4 months, hopefully we can concentrate and define the boundary of what can and cannot be done by a caretaker government. Because I'm sure if that is not done, the current Prime Minister, who so blatantly before promised everything in return for a vote, will actually abuse everything in his last days in power to offer money, projects and everything. And that's the end of any hope of a good democracy in Malaysia. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions of the panel?
Yeah. I have got two simple questions. One is, why aren't we focusing on the giver in this corruption affairs? We are always talking on somebody receiving, but the giver has been left out in this discussion. So how do we, shouldn't we go into this multifaceted approach of telling givers too that they should stay away from this, number one. Number two is our investigative and prosecution arms who are supposed to go after these criminals. They always fall with a flat face. The other side seems to have better lawyers or, since Mahathir's time, we have not caught anybody. I think the last Mantri Besar Bernard said was, I think, my father's time. So we are not focusing in how do we build strength in these two arms, the investigative and the prosecution and the giver. We are not, we are talking a lot about that, but I don't see enough discussion in this area. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very relevant and important question. I myself am not sure of the legal position whether the giver of a bribe in Malaysia is liable in any way. So, Bernard, would you like to take a crack at this?
To be a giver and to be a receiver is both wrong. We are now focused on this movement called ABU, A-B-U. Anything but UMNO. After we follow Rafizi and gang into Putrajaya, our clarion call will be ABC. Anything but corruption.
I'd like to respond a bit on that, and I think I got to refer to Mr. Lazar. I think as far as SPRM Law Act is concerned, because corruption is defined by the Act, Section 16 actually does includes people who offer bribery. It does, 16A and 16B, it does. The problem is usually it's a lot easier to catch people who receive bribery because there are not many people who refuse bribery in this country. It's two different things, because a complainant must lodge a complaint with SPRM. From there, an investigation is done, and then if the prosecution is successful, and then you would have the accused put behind bars. So it must come from the complainant. Usually the complainant, the aggrieved, is somebody who has to give a bribe to get something in return. It is, I think, statistically a lot lower to find people who are offered bribery in Malaysia, refuse, and then take it to SPRM and say, this guy and so with this evidence has offered me bribery. There have been cases, I'm sure, although it's smaller cases. So again, it goes back to while the law is, I think, enough and adequate to handle both, but it's just a question of practice. Although my personal view in between the giver and the receiver, of course, there is moral responsibility on the part of the receiver, at least to exercise restraint, because it is him or her who is in a position to abuse his position that would have attracted offer of bribery in the first place. I mean, if we take the case of Nazri Aziz, for example, I would like to have a friend who would have offered me a 1 million car, but I am in no position to offer anything in return. Of course, my culture would have only offered something like that to people who are in a position to influence certain important things. So it is, of course, the onus of responsibility lies more with the receiver to have that, to take that moral high ground, if we are serious, especially if a lot of these people who end up taking bribes, especially if they are from the authorities or from the civil servants or people or corporations of good standing. Of course, the onus is more on them if we are serious about fighting corruption, to say no to corruption and make sure then drag the people who offer corruption to MACC. And quickly, Mr. Shankar, on the second part, which is why there doesn't seem to be a lot of conviction. Of course, when I sit down with SPRM, they put the blame on people like me. Because they say it's people like you who go around and spoil our case because you disrupt the witnesses, or you disrupt, or you spoil, you give early tip-offs that people actually stop and cover their tracks. My own experience is that corruption in Malaysia is so pervasive that it's not that easy for anyone to cover their tracks. I mean, how do you cover 5, 6, 7 millions worth of condos in the case of Shahrizad? So I still rely on my belief that if the authorities are really serious about convicting people who accept bribes, I think they can. It's all about political will. And that political will requires a strong signal from the top to say that from the next government onwards, the government is all anything but corruption. And I think when that is done, the people on the ground, from the public prosecutors to SPRM commissioners, would understand what to do. And I think within 1 or 2 generations, we could completely get rid of corruption, hopefully, in this country. Thank you.
Come, Robert, this is right up your alley, the legal position.
The legal position is very clear, that both the giver and the receiver commit an offense. The problem with corruption is that it is often described as a victimless crime. Victimless because both the giver and the receiver have an interest in not revealing it. So how do you crack it? I think the answer is, with modern technology and with a good surveillance system and investigation, it shouldn't be too difficult to do that. No longer are you dependent on the evidence of either the giver or the receiver, because they're not going to squeal on each other. And if you look at the prosecution in countries outside Malaysia, you will find that they have been able to mount prosecutions on the basis of tip-offs. You've got recorded conversations. You have the money trail. It's not easy to hide the movement of money. So it is possible. It's not an impossible task. But of course, you must have the will in the first place to follow through, and the professionalism, which I think we can. I don't think we are that, backward that we cannot do these things. It can be done. It has been done in the past. So I think that there can be a change if there is the will to do it.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. My special thanks to Rafizi. Hold on.
Let me continue a little bit. Personal story. How to avoid giving. I know of a lady, she's incorrigible. She's always getting tickets, and she's always being stopped by the police. Nowadays, she's very intelligent. Anytime she's being stopped by a police, she goes into a wailing fit. She cries and non-stop for even 10 minutes. Jalan. Now, if you come along from Sri Damansara through the tunnel and all right, you're bound to meet up with our friends. I was in the car of the late Tunku Vic. He had his driver black in front. driving, and two of us at the back. And we knew that we were going to be stopped. And the moment police stopped to ask the stupid question, do you know that you went over the limit? Before we could say that, my good friend Boom says, hey Vic, make your bloody driver pay for the fine, man. Knock it off his salary, man. Of course, all this conversation in Bahasa, and when the policeman heard, $300 you're going to take away from his salary. Yes, we told him don't speed, what? Jalan. Try it, very effective.
And the rest of you who are here who made the special effort to come and help me, in a way, realize my dream of writing a book and getting it published. Because you'll find that writing a book perhaps takes 25% of the task. The other 75% is finding a publisher, you know. And this book, Tiger Isle, was first published on Amazon.com as a self-published book. And it was only later that I got in touch with Chong and Gerakbudaya, and they agreed to publish the book at their own cost. So I hope you all have a good read of the book and enjoyed the night. And thank you very much for coming and for the support. And those of you who wish to stay and enjoy the buffet, please don't feel shy, because there's plenty of food. Don't let it go to waste. And stay on and enjoy if you as much as you want. And I shall take leave now, and thank you all very much.